I spent 3 days traveling solo in Edinburgh, Scotland. Since Edinburgh is relatively small, I was able to see much of the city and sights in one day and then venture outside the city for the next 2 days. This video covers my day exploring Edinburgh, including an evening at the military tattoo. Excursions to the Highlands, Loch Ness, and St. Andrews are covered in other videos. Look for links to all my Scotland videos in the description below. I started my day in Edinburgh early. I had registered for a free walking tour of the city through viator.com. If you've never been on a free walking tour, it's a simple process. You sign up and then just tip the guide whatever you think they deserve. I've been on a few free tours and have never been disappointed. For this one, we met in front of a store on the Royal Mile in Edinburgh and met our Scottish guide, Graham. The Royal Mile is a succession of streets forming the main thoroughfare of the old town of the city. We followed him a short distance to Parliament Square. The square is not a formal square, but consists of numerous landmark buildings and statues, including St. Giles Cathedral, the Mercat Cross, an equestrian statue of Charles II of Scotland, informally called the Pissing Pony, more on that later, the Supreme Courts of Scotland, the Queensberry Memorial, and a statue of James Braidwood, who founded the world's first municipal fire service. The best part of this tour was our guide's fun stories, including how the Pissing Pony got its nickname. The story is that the people of Edinburgh did not like the king. Every year they had a ceremony where a schoolboy would climb to the top of the statue and put a crown on the king's head. This crown made holes in the top of the statue, and it started to fill with water, and started leaning to one side. So they decided it needed a drainage hole in the bottom. You guessed it, they drilled a hole in the underside of the horse to drain the water. People used to walk by the statue in the pouring rain simply to watch the king riding a peeing horse. It was stories like these that made the short tour more interesting and fun. Next on our agenda was the Advocate's Close. All over Edinburgh are these narrow alleyways called closes. This one had a great perspective of a cathedral in the distance. We walked midway down where a guide told us stories about how people lived for centuries, and the rich enjoying wide spaces, and the poor crowded into tiny rooms. He also mentioned how people threw their buckets of human excrement out their windows into this area, and if drunks were stumbling by, they might get it dumped on them, which is perhaps how they came up with the term shit-faced. Who knows if this is true, but it was another fun story. Next was the Writers' Museum, which was set in a square of old buildings. The guide again shared interesting history about Robert Louis Stevenson, who was born and educated in Edinburgh. We then headed out where we could view across the expanse to Newtown, then stopped in front of New College. When I first arrived in Edinburgh, I thought this was a church or cathedral, so I was surprised it was a university because the architecture was so ornate. We then headed to the backside of Edinburgh Castle. It was fascinating to see how it was built on the cliffs and rocks. It was certainly a feat of brilliant architecture and construction. Next, we walked down Grassmarket Street, which had fabulous shops and cafes spilling out onto the street. He pointed out Victoria Street as we headed to Greyfriars Kirkyard, which is a historic cemetery on beautiful grounds. As you enter, you see the Greyfriar Bobby, which is a little statue of a terrier dog. Evidently in 1850, a gardener named John Gray arrived in Edinburgh. Unable to find work as a gardener, he joined the Edinburgh police force as a night watchman. To keep him company through the long winter nights, John took on a dog called Bobby. Through thick and thin, the two of them trudged through the streets every night. When John died of tuberculosis and was buried in Greyfriars Kirkyard, Bobby refused to leave his master's grave even in the worst weather conditions. Another wonderful story. We then wandered through the cemetery and were told some fascinating stories. This is where the 2-hour tour ended. I had the rest of the day to explore, so I decided to go inside some of the places we had walked by. First, I walked to Victoria Street, which was lined with wonderfully colorful shops. I loved the names of some of the shops, such as Oink and Elephant House. I saw many people lined up to go in one store, so checked it out. I discovered it was a Harry Potter museum. Of course. I then walked to the Giles Cathedral. I paid £6 to enter. It is a striking cathedral. The walls are lined with intricate stained glass windows and the ceilings are magnificent, with beautiful arches. I especially enjoyed this blue ceiling framing the stained glass window. Then I visited the Writers' Museum. Admission was free, and you entered into some very narrow, winding stairways. On one level was a tribute to Robert Louis Stevenson, and another room to Sir Walter Scott. After a break, I headed out in the early evening and walked to the current Parliament building and palace of Hollyrood House, but all were closed since it was after 6 p.m. From there, I hiked up the street to Calton Hill. I entered from a different direction than most people, through an old cemetery. Eventually, I found the front entrance and hiked a gradual incline path to the top. There were superb 360-degree views of the city, as well as the shoreline. There are several historic structures at the top, but the view is the main reason for the hike. You could return on the same path, or there were some stairs for a quicker way down. I had ordered tickets to the Edinburgh Castle's military tattoo, and had been warned that it could get very cold in the outdoor arena. Since my luggage had been delayed, I stopped by some stores and purchased a beanie, gloves, and a rain poncho. It was a smart purchase because I wouldn't have made it through the evening without them. I walked to the castle and arrived almost an hour early, which was not a good idea since it was so cold. I had purchased a seat a few rows from the very top, so the wind was intense. The performance was quite an extravaganza, and not what I expected. There was a mass of performers involved in the production, so I could see why they had to charge so much for the tickets. Here are a few clips from the show. When the finale began, I was so cold, I made the poor decision to walk down to the bottom of the long stairs. I thought I would watch the end from below where it was warmer. However, they wouldn't let me stand on the ramp, so I moved to the end of the stadium. I watched there for a while until I was kicked out of there too. They told me to either go back to my seat, which was a huge climb and a distraction to other viewers, or leave the area, so I just left a little early. I did see most of the finale, but I was told later that I missed a bagpipe soloist. Oh well. Advice to anyone planning to go: dress very warmly, bring a rain poncho, and stay until the very end. As I was leaving the castle, there were people all lined up behind stanchions. The band evidently marches out into the street after the performance, so people were all lined up to watch it. If you can't afford tickets to the show, you can at least get a glimpse of the bagpipe procession. By the end of this day, I had put in about 20,000 steps and climbed numerous stairs and inclines. The city is easy to navigate, but the itinerary requires some endurance. I was here during the annual Fringe Performing Arts Festival, which made the streets more colorful and crowded. There were many young people out in the streets pitching their shows, busking, and dressing in outrageous attire to attract attention. I enjoyed the liveliness, but those that prefer less crowds might want to think twice about coming in August. For senior and solo travelers, I felt very comfortable wandering the streets by myself. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments section, and please subscribe if you would like to follow this journey. There are now 2 new resources for senior and solo travelers: the Senior Solo Travel website and the new Facebook forum where you can interact with other senior and solo travelers. I've left links to all the sites in the description, so check it out. And if you'd like to follow my senior and solo travel journeys, please like and subscribe. Cheers!